All right, everyone, good morning. Welcome to the FSA text-based writing session. And even though it is titled FSA, obviously third grade teachers, this is going to benefit you as well, since we really all follow the same process. Again, my name is Sharon Alonzo. I'm the K-12 writing supervisor. And I'm really excited that you guys chose this session this morning. I'm hoping that you find that I'm going to be sharing kind of a ton of information, a new resource. We're going to really dig into the process of responding to a text-based writing prompt, and hopefully kind of answer a lot of the questions that you may have had around writing over the past few months. I will share my contact information at the end, so feel free to call me, text me, email me at any time, and I'd be happy to answer questions or clarify anything for you. This is definitely a jam-packed session, but I have built-in time to really process and think and reflect. So hopefully you'll find that those come at good times within the session. So I also want to remind you, I have a PowerPoint up, which means I can't really see you guys or monitor the chat. One of my district coaches is going to join us in a little bit, so she'll help me monitor that when she's able to. But for now, let's just go ahead and get started. So the agenda for the session today is we will have some information and updates. We'll talk about a new resource I have to share with you all. Then we'll talk about text-based writing, the 6-step process, talk about how it could look in the classroom within our writing block of the frameworks, and then have our final reflection. Just like the session I did in October, all of the resources from today, including this PowerPoint and any documents that I refer to, will be available in our ELA resource page under Coaches Meeting Resources. They're not there yet, but I'll put them there as soon as the day is over today. So just wanted to let you know that you will have access to all of those documents. Excuse me. You don't need any documents really in front of you for the session, so just know that everything we talk about will be available there. So now for our first part on the agenda, information and updates. The first one, hopefully you have already talked to your AP at your school about whether you are going to participate in this year's Florida 4-H public speaking program. So this is what was formerly known as Tropicana Speech. Tropicana is no longer sponsoring the contest, but it is basically the same thing that it's always been. Registration is currently open now. Information has already been shared with the APs in multiple ways. The deadline to submit registration forms is next Friday before winter break. So please, 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 if this is something that you are interested in participating for 4th and 5th grade, please see your AP if you haven't already, since they are the designated delegate for communication. The timeline obviously is different than in the past. I know normally the program kind of got started in September, but obviously with a delayed school year and e-learning and COVID, we've had lots of challenges to kind of work around. So we are definitely going to go through with the contest this year, but the timeline is going to look a bit different, and I'll show you that on the next slide. And in order to meet safety guidelines and provide equal access, the school, area, and district level contests are going to be held virtually. So it's going to be different this year. But I strongly, strongly believe in this competition and really want to give students and teachers access and the ability to continue with something that we've been doing in this district for many, many years. So only the classroom level contest will be held face-to-face following safety guidelines, unless of course you're an e-learning teacher, and then even your classroom level will be held virtually. If you register to participate, trust me, I will give you guys lots of information on how this is going to work. I am working with the tech team right now on kind of logistics and permissions and things like that, because we want to make it as safe and equitable as possible for everyone. So just stay tuned for information on that if you decide to participate. Just a reminder, if everyone could turn off their mics, that would be amazing. Thank you. So here's the timeline for the Florida 4-H public speaking program. Registration opened last week. Registration closes next Friday at 5 p.m. And that's for those competing in area or district. If you're only just keeping it at your classroom or school level, you don't have to worry about that. Program materials will be mailed to APs in January, and then you will have just about 6 weeks to go through your school and classroom level contests, and then send those school winner names and surveys in by February 26th. And then depending on the amount of participants we have this year, because I am gathering it's going to be a little less than normal, depending on that, we will determine whether we need to have multiple area contests or just go directly to a district contest, kind of determined by the numbers of participants. So that's why there's not really a specific date there. And then for those of you who don't participate in the area or district level competitions and you just do it at your school level, you are still asked to complete those surveys for the 4-H program to have that information. So again, please see your APs if you want to talk about participating in this year's contest. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in our curriculum right now. So I've had the question asked because you may not be to this last lesson yet in the curriculum. When are we shifting to opinion? So I kind of just wanted to put here, as a reading coach, you need to know about all grade levels. So in 3rd grade, the shift to opinion writing happens in lesson 13 in LAFS. So if you're not there yet, just know when you get to 13, that's when the lessons shift to opinion. 4th grade, it's also lesson 13. And then in 5th grade, it's lesson 10, which you may or may not have already done. Also, you'll see there the addition of a 3rd text. That's not happening in all grade levels at the same time, but just know in 4th and 5th, we're really making an effort to add that 3rd text, especially when we get into the lessons in January, February, and March, because we want students to be able to practice pulling evidence and recording evidence from more than 2 texts, since that's what they may get on FSA. For those of you in 5th grade, or for you reading coaches who might have heard a little bit about the social studies through writing cycles that we implemented in 5th grade as kind of a trial to see how it would go. 5th grade, lesson 11 and a flex week was the very first social studies unit, and that was on the colonial market economy. Then for lesson 12 and 13 in 5th grade, we are doing a science through writing cycle where we are using some of the science LDC texts, and that's on exploring planets. So if you're not there yet, you'll see those lessons soon. Then just to look into the future a little bit for 5th grade, lesson 14 and 15 will be a 10-day cycle on American colonies. Lesson 16 and 17 will be one on declaring independence. And then lesson 18 in a flex week, this is the second part of February, will be a Black History themed cycle. Then we are going to kind of squeeze in one social studies through writing cycle in 4th grade. And that's going to be for lesson 16 and 17, and it's going to be on Pioneer Life. And then lesson 19 in a flex week, which will be the same time as the 5th grade, we'll also do a Black History themed 10-day cycle. And those are the last 2 weeks of February. So I'm going to update the curriculum guides in the resource page so that you can see this, but just know that we're kind of actively working on this. This is not something we planned at the beginning of the year, so we're really trying to get it out to you as quick as possible. But I wanted to give you kind of an update for what was coming down the pipe, especially for our 5th and our 4th grade teachers. So any questions? I'm going to look at the chat, see if there's anything really specific to this. No. Any questions really specific to this slide in particular that you want to like quickly unmute and ask? All right, amazing. I'm going to move on. Sorry. All right. So Q3 plan. So the really good news is, and this just happened this week, is that we did get the go-ahead to continue our lesson creation in Canvas for 3rd quarter. That means we will continue providing those resources for brick and mortar and e-learning. So for writing specifically, it's going to be those 10-day lesson plan cycles with PowerPoints and documents and resources to go with it, as well as those modules built into Canvas for our e-learning kiddos. We're going to continue that emphasis on the 6 steps for writing success. Just know that as the teacher of the classroom, it's kind of you have the freedom to adjust the writing cycles and daily plans to meet the specific needs of your students. And I'm actually going to talk to you about that a little bit more at the end of the session today. We're going to look at a block of a 10-day cycle and talk about how that can be flexible. Just know that really in the 3rd quarter, teachers should be doing kind of an ongoing analysis of trends in their student writing, really paying attention to what they've really picked up on and what they're going to need more help with. Use the Writing Strategy Index. This is a teaser because that's the new resource that I'm going to share with you in just a few moments. But it's going to give you ideas to strengthen writing, but also just the ability to use your tried and true mini lessons and strategies that you know work with students. 4th and 5th grade, we will continue those 10-day cycles. However, 3rd grade is going to continue 10-day cycles as well. But however, in 4th and 5th grade specifically, we are going to provide some additional text sets and prompts in case some teachers really want to shift to a 5-day cycle, so that students are really kind of practicing more with that 120-minute time frame. So they're writing an essay within 4 or 5 days versus within 2 weeks. So that's something we'll talk about at the end of today, but just a little teaser of what's coming for quarter 3. Mid-year writing assessment for grades 2 through 5. You may have seen this in the newsletter. You may have heard kind of rumblings of this, but the mid-year writing assessment window changed. It was like 1 week in January, and now it's an entire month. So that's really, really awesome. Plus January is jam-packed for you guys. We know that. We know that you have Achieve and SIPs and Laughs and iReady and all kinds of things going on. So now you're going to have a whole month for your mid-year writing assessment. Assessments will be shared by the assessment department with APs in order to make copies prior to when you guys decide to give the assessment. Those assessments will also be available through School City for e-learners, just like the baseline was. The mode will be opinion for all 4 grade levels. And just know that I am going to be possibly doing some slight revisions on the mid-year assessments. So some grade levels may be the same as last year and others might be changed or revised a bit just to kind of be better. I know there's a few grade levels that need some work, so just know that's being worked on. Rubrics, 4th and 5th, you'll use that FSA opinion rubric. 2nd and 3rd, you guys have district opinion rubrics, and if you haven't already seen them, I actually did link them in Canvas, and I'll show you where those are in just a moment. So I'm going to say it, I didn't put it on the slide, but I'm sure you've heard this assessment has now been titled optional. That actually breaks my heart a bit. I know it's overwhelming to test students and to score papers, but as a writing teacher for 17 years, I find the mid-year assessment really, really beneficial for many reasons. So let's talk about why we think it might be beneficial to administer the mid-year writing assessment, even though it is not necessarily required by the district anymore. So I'd love for you guys to type in your chat. I'm going to open my chat box so I can see what you guys are putting, but I'd really love for you to see your responses. Why is it beneficial to go ahead and go forward with the mid-year writing assessment? There's many reasons, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you guys would type them in the chat, I have it up. Yes, to determine the needs and strengths of students, stamina and planning, provides data, yes. Indicator, progress monitoring, absolutely, new mode. Yes, absolutely. I was really hoping you guys would say some of this stuff because this is how I feel too. So with that said, what I want you to start thinking about now that you know the new dates, right? So you've got so much more time, not just that 1 week window. You have, it's further away than it used to be. So you have even more time to plan and prepare. What I suggest you guys do is get with your APs and talk about it. Decide if you're gonna do it all the same week for your whole school, if each grade level is gonna do a different week, however you wanna do it, but you can start planning for it now so that it doesn't seem so kind of daunting and overwhelming. But I really appreciate your feedback on this. And if you've got further questions about mid-year, feel free to contact me later. Just know that all communication kind of other than this regarding the assessment will come from assessment directly to your assistant principals. All right. So K-5 writing rubrics. I know I told you guys this at the beginning of the year that we had created district created rubrics for K1, 2, and 3 and all 3 modes. And then of course, 4th and 5th, we're still using those FSA text-based writing rubrics. We created those as a tool to assess student writing aligned to grade level standards with format and language to match the FSA rubrics. And I have uploaded all of them into Canvas. So I literally did it 2 days ago. So most of you have not seen any of these rubrics, but if you look in the K-5 ELA teacher resource page under instructional resources and then click on writing, you will see rubrics for all of the grade levels. Just know that the K1, 2, and 3 rubrics are new, right? We've just created them. So we don't know exactly how they're going to work or what kind of feedback you guys might provide to us to make revisions for next year. But we really felt it was important that teachers in all grade levels had some sort of tool they could use that's really truly aligned to their grade level, but yet still kind of similar to the format of FSA, so that as those students progress in grade levels, they're already used to kind of the ideas and structure that they would have for FSA. So go there, check out those rubrics. I'm really excited to kind of hear what you guys think about them. Professional development. So obviously this session today is going to hit a lot of the things that you guys have been asking for. Please know that the old Moodles are no longer accessible. So some of the Moodles all of the Moodles, so the scoring ones, all of those Moodles that Tamisha Creed used to have available, they're not even accessible anymore through the district. So I'm kind of having to start over and recreate. So please know, I know the next one that has to happen for mid-year is a 4th and 5th grade FSA rubric and scoring session. So I'm working on an asynchronous session where it will be available through Canvas. It'll be self-paced. You go in and do it when you have the time. That will be available in January. And then some goals I'm working towards is possibly collecting writing samples to create rubric and scoring sessions for other grade levels, and then create an asynchronous 6 steps for writing success session, which we're going to do some of the 6 steps in this session too. So this video may be really helpful for other teachers as well. I did pay attention to the suggestions you guys gave in the opening session for professional development. I know if you're a reading coach and you said, you know, K1 writing or K2 writing, know that Megan and I are definitely in talks about what we can possibly provide for you guys in January. All right, so new resource I'm really excited about, and then we're gonna have some processing and think time because I know this has been a lot already. So I have a new resource to provide for you, and it is a writing strategy index. So basically what it is it's a document that has kind of definitions and examples of different skills, strategies, and elements for writing. So based on the trends and the needs of your students, the index might provide ideas for you. It includes the title of the strategy or the skill, a definition and purpose, and then some examples. So the categories that you'll see in the index are the 6 steps, organization and structure, evidence, elaborative techniques, sentence structure and variety, word choice, conventions and grammar, punctuation, voice and style, and figurative language. I really wanted to provide a resource for you guys that wasn't just this list, like, hey, if your kids need help, work on that. I wanted to actually give you examples of what those mean or what skills and strategies might fit into those categories. I have included some of the techniques from the brand new best standards that we'll be kind of starting to implement next year. So we're already starting to prepare for that shift in our standards. So this is what the index, this is just 2 pages. I think it has come to 17 pages, you guys, which I know is really lengthy, but I wanted it to be as comprehensive as possible. So here's an example. This is the first page on the left where you'll see the categories, and then it starts with the 6 steps where I walk you through all 6 steps. And then you'll see another page in the middle. This just happens to be the conventions and grammar page. I obviously didn't include every part of speech because I'm really thinking about some of these 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders and what they really need to focus on or what could help them easily in their writing. And then again, it's 17 pages just like this of titles, definitions, and examples. So my hope is that once you determine what you'd like to do with your students, this is where you guys can pull out those mini lessons, look in our curriculum, look in some of your other resources, or even get on the internet and find you know, lessons and activities that might help your students once you've determined the strategy or the skill that you really want to focus on. So whew, that was a lot of information, you guys. I know. So I want you to think about it. What information confirms something that you already knew? And what was an aha, something that was new or exciting to you in the first part of our session? So Mandy's here with me. Mandy Leathers, my district coach, is here with me. So if you guys want to pop some answers in the chat, you can answer one or both questions. But I'd really love to hear, you know, what confirmed something you already knew and what are you excited about? Can't wait to see. Soraya, great question as far as the index. I mean, it really could be a K-5 index. There are strategies on there that obviously even our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd graders can do and you know, need to know as well. But just know a lot of it's super text-based writing focused. So it's probably going to be most beneficial in 2nd through 5th, but there's definitely skills and strategies on there for all 5th grade or all 6th grade levels. Thank you for asking. The index is nowhere yet, but I'm going to link it in the coaches resources page, and then I'm going to try to figure out where else to link it so that or I'll link it in the ELA resource page in probably multiple places so that you guys know where to go get it and teachers know where to go get it. And I'll do that at the end of the day today. For those of you talking about the rubrics for K1, 2, and 3, I am so excited that you're excited about those. And I really want you guys to send me feedback. So I know I'm not providing like a scoring or a calibration training to go along with them right now because we've never used them. We don't even have student samples to go with them. So as you and your teachers start kind of attempting to use those rubrics to assess writing in those earlier grades, please email me feedback like, hey, this category is really good, but I think this category is missing this, or whatever it is. I want to hear your feedback this year so that I can make revisions for next year. All right, we're going to move on. Text-based writing. So let's talk about text-based writing in general, and then we're going to going to go through the process of looking at an entire prompt and text set and going through the 6 steps together. So just want to kind of remind you of where we started this year. The whole goal was that we began the year by building the foundation and really helping students understand the structure and the elements of a text-based essay. And that's where the 6 steps for success came in. And hopefully that's what you've been working on this whole first part of the year. Once students have that foundation and you think they're ready to move into the furnishing of the house, it's really where you're kind of honing in on their sentence variety, word choice, varying transitions and things like that. And then you're able to work on the decorations, which is where you start really kind of improving their technique, using voice, style, and just really strengthening all the elements of their essay. So in looking at this document, I think this writing strategy index is going to be a really useful resource for you to determine, hey, what's something I can focus on this week or this particular writing cycle that might strengthen my students' writing. So here's our 6 steps for success. This is the process that we use in our district in grades 3 through 8 to help our students remember the steps they should take. I've seen this hand and this poster up in a ton of schools and a ton of classrooms. So I'm glad you guys have really kind of grabbed onto this idea. I know from middle school experience that the kids really like the reminder. It's something easy for them. So quickly just review these steps if you're not familiar with them. Unpacking the prompt is really just determining your purpose, your audience, and your task. Brainstorming, and I'm going to model this for you. Identify what you already know, think, and feel about that topic. Then you get into the reading to find your evidence. Organizing your ideas and plan. I'm going to spend a lot of time showing you guys what that organizing your ideas can look like and why it can help students. Writing that essay, that introduction, body, conclusion. And revising and editing your essay, just really teaching kids to use the last few minutes of their 120 minutes to make any revisions that they can. So I want to remind you that the steps are directly aligned to the prompt guidelines of the FSA. So only steps 1 and 2 aren't mentioned on the FSA, and that's to unpack the prompt and brainstorm. So really those are the only 2 that students need to kind of remember. And then you'll see right there that on the FSA, it's going to remind them to do steps 3, 4, 5, and 6. Like I mentioned, this is something used starting in 3rd grade all the way through 8th grade. And then there are multiple strategies and resources that can be used while still following the steps. So if you follow the 6 steps, but you like to unpack your prompt in a different way, that's perfectly okay. If you like to plan in a different way, marker code the text in a different way, all of those strategies are fine. You're still kind of following that 6-step process. So we're going to try something. I have not done this in a really, really long time. So I want to do a poll with you guys. I want you to either respond in a different URL on your computer or on your phone. And I want you to, in one to 3 words, tell me what makes a high quality text-based essay. So think about an essay and all the elements. What's kind of one thing that really sticks out to you that makes a high quality text-based essay? So you either type the first thing into a new URL box, or you text Sharon Alonzo 803 to 37607 and then text your word or words. So I'm going to pull up the poll in just a minute. I want to make sure that you know how to respond. All right, let's see. Mandy, do you guys see the Wordle?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, awesome. Nice. So obviously we know it's text-based writing, so we're seeing evidence come up a lot. If the word's really big, it means it's been entered in multiple times. So we see that evidence is definitely one of the things. We have that elaboration. We know it needs to be a balance. It does absolutely needs to be organized, relevant. Nice. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for participating in that. I'm going to go ahead and head back to the slideshow so that we can move on with our process. So let's talk about it. So we're going to walk through the 6-step process. We are using a science-related prompt and text set. You don't need it, so don't worry. I have everything on the slide that you need. This is the 5th grade lesson 12 and 13 cycle. So if you're not there in 5th grade yet, this is what they're going to be doing for lesson 12 and 13. I think it's to be on the curriculum guide. It's like the first week back in January, the first and second week back in January. And it kind of coincides with the LDC cycle in science, the second week. So the first week, we're going to kind of prep them in writing for the science LDC cycle, and then they'll be doing the same topic in science and writing that second week. So I want to kind of somewhat model or show you how the process might look with students. I don't have an Elmo, obviously, so we're going to just do it through the slideshow, and I'll really just show you, you know, how the 6 steps work. So the first one is you're going to unpack the prompt. So here is our prompt after reading the planets in our solar system, the inner planets and the outer planets. Write an essay in which you give your opinion about whether you would rather explore the inner planets or the outer planets. So you'll see right there that we are doing a 3 text set with our 5th graders this time around, really trying to give them that exposure. You'll see the FSA guidelines are going to remind you of those steps 3, 4, 5, and 6. One way that we unpack the prompt in our lessons that we are pushing out is to tap into your writing, where you kind of put a box around the task. That's your topic or your question. Circle the audience if there is one. Most of the time it's kind of inferred, and then underline your purpose, which is going to be inform or to give an opinion. So here is what that would look like. You're going to give your opinion about whether you would rather explore the inner planets or the outer planets. So that moves us directly into step 2, which is brainstorming. This is a very, very quick step. It's done after unpacking, but before reading. And I'm going to show you where this step comes back into the process at the end of the writing process. So you're going to think about, now that you know what you are writing about, take some time to think about it. What do you already know about it? What do you already think about it? How do you feel about it? So this is about exploring outer space and deciding whether I'd rather explore the inner planets or the outer planets. So what do you think kids might come up with? So here are some possible examples. So they might say, well, I know that there's some planets closer to the sun. I know there's a ring around Saturn. I know that some planets are really hot and some are freezing cold. I use this acronym to remember the order of the planets. My very excellent mother just served us noodles. And then I think space is really cool, but it's kind of scary. So this is just a quick example. In like 2 minutes, what could a kid come up with about this topic before they even start reading the text? So that's all they do right now. And then I'll bring this back up later on in the writing process. So step 3. So I want you to remember those first two steps shouldn't take more than 5 minutes of their 120 minutes. So once they've really learned and practiced how to unpack, identify the mode of writing, and really determine what they're going to be writing about, and then brainstorming very quickly what they already might think, know, or feel about the topic, we're ready to move on to step 3, because this is a very lengthy step. So we are going to read to write and find our evidence. So based on the prompt, what evidence are you looking for? Determine how you're going to mark the text. Are you going to use a symbol or a letter to indicate something specific about what you marked? So in thinking about this particular prompt, I'm looking for information about inner planets and outer planets because I have to determine which one I'd rather explore. And I'm going to mark the evidence about inner planets with an I and the evidence about outer planets, with an O. So very simple. I could underline as well, but that's just what students really need to think about before they start reading. What are they looking for and how are they going to mark it? So this is the text set. This is what it will look like if you teach 5th grade and you are doing this lesson. We're not going to read through all 3 texts today, but we are going to read the first few paragraphs of the first 2 sources so that you can really see how the next few steps play out. So let's take a look at source one. This is just the first 6 paragraphs of source one. I want you to read these first few paragraphs, and I want you to think about where students might mark evidence about inner planets, and then where they might mark evidence about outer planets. Now, I'm going to forewarn you right now, and if you're a 5th grade teacher, know this is coming. Source one is going to take some inferencing because the text does not explicitly state which ones are the inner planets and which ones are the outer planets. Don't worry, they'll figure it out by source 2 and source 3 because they're very specific, but just know if they're marking for inner and outer planets on this source 1, it may take a little bit of inferencing, but I'll show you an example of what that might look like. I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and I want you guys to read through these paragraphs. So hopefully you've had a chance to read through these first 6 paragraphs. I'm going to show you some examples of where I might mark some evidence as I'm reading. So right there at paragraph 2, it talks about the 4 planets closest to the sun. As a kid, I'm kind of making the inference that these are probably the inner planets because they're the ones closest to the sun. So I put a little I there. And that's really just the idea that they are closest to the sun and that they're rocky. I might put an O right here for outer planets because it says after those 4 come Jupiter and Saturn, and they're gas giants. I might also put an O here because the 2 farthest planets are the ice giants, Uranus and Neptune. So I'm really just starting to identify some characteristics about the inner planets and the outer planets. If I happen to mark this wrong the first time because I'm not sure which ones are which, I know I can always go back and kind of like adjust it after I determine the real ones in source 2 and source 3. Then down here in paragraph 4, since I'm assuming that Mercury is one of the inner planets, one of the things I might mark is that Mercury is the smallest planet and that it's located closest to the sun. I might also mark that it has the fastest orbit of all the planets. I might find that interesting. And then the fact that Venus spins slowly in the opposite direction of most planets, I think is an interesting fact about Venus. And then the idea that the atmosphere traps heat like a blanket, making it the hottest planet in the solar system. I know when I brainstormed, I talked about how I've learned that some planets are hot and some are cold. So this is kind of going along with that, those thoughts that I already had about planets. So I just want to remind you that when you're really first, doing this with students, or if you think you have a challenging or a complex text at first, you could always model this or do a think aloud with students for the first few paragraphs and then kind of release them to do the rest of the source on their own. So really depending on their needs. So let's do the same thing with source 2. We're just going to read the first few paragraphs of source 2. Think about where they might mark evidence about inner planets and outer planets. Obviously, since this is the one about inner planets, we're probably not going to mark any O's right now, but just kind of for you to see how the process works. I'm going to give you a few minutes to read through these 5 paragraphs. Okay, hopefully you've been able to get through that. I'm going to show you some examples of where I might mark for some evidence. So since we are specifically talking about inner planets, I know that I might have put an I here because it talks about how Mercury is the smallest, fastest, and closest planet to the sun. I might mark another I here because this sentence tells me that it has the wildest temperature changes. That's pretty interesting. I might mark an I here because it talks about how the landscape is covered with deep craters. Then down here in paragraph 16, the fact that the temperature during the day is extremely hot and the nights are extremely cold sounds exactly like my brainstorming thought that I had. Then down here for Venus, the fact that the air is poisonous is super interesting to me. I don't think I'd want to go there. And then the fact that they have lots of lightning and high winds. So I want you to notice, and I know kids, right? This is just lots of details and information about every planet. And all they've been asked to do is determine which one they'd rather explore and why. And so that doesn't really like narrow it down for them. They don't know that they should be looking specifically for temperature or weather. They don't know that they should specifically be looking for, does life that live there, right? They just kind of know that they're looking for details about the inner planets and details about the outer planets to then determine which one they'd rather explore. So obviously a kid could mark almost every sentence in this, but we really want to kind of like encourage them not to do that. Like really focus, you guys, like what are the things that stick out to you about each of these planets? So things like their wild temperature changes, their craters, the extremely hot and extremely cold, the fact that it's poisonous or has lightning, right? So that's why I really only marked certain things. And I want kids to know that they don't have to find evidence in every paragraph. In fact, they necessarily shouldn't find evidence in every paragraph because, you know, some paragraphs aren't going to have information that's useful to them. So just the more you kind of help students through this process, the more they see it, the more you do a think aloud with them, the more they'll really start to understand. So then all you would do is repeat the process with source 3. We're not going to do that just for the sake of time today, because again, I really want to get through all 6 steps and talk about the writing cycle. So step 4, I'm really excited about this one. I know this has been the one step that's kind of been, the worry or the concern or the question for teachers. So I really want to spend some time on this and show you how the step is done. And really how it's going to help challenge our students to go further than just marking the text, because they really need to show that they can demonstrate understanding of the text. They need to show synthesis of evidence, and this particular step really helps them do this. So let's talk about it. So organizing your ideas. I've had this question from day 1. No, they're not going to get that cute little organizing your ideas T-chart from FSA. However, every student receives a planning page. And in the past, we've typically only used one side of it. So now we're going to use both sides. So the front sheet always looks like this, where it kind of has that box with lines and you're like, planning sheet, this looks like a writing sheet. And in fact, some kids get confused and write their entire essay here. But what we teach kids to do is kind of just do this T-chart or your source recording on this side. And then on the back is where you would do your planning or your four box or your quad or however you plan your essay. And I'll show you that in a minute. So for this particular prompt, it's an opinion prompt. So this is different than what we've been doing, because instead of recording by source, now we're recording by inner planets and outer planets. So you'll see how I labeled the T-chart there. So I may have information from multiple sources under inner planets and information from multiple sources under outer planets. Remember, this is just a paragraph number and a word or phrase. It's not meant to take a ton of extra time. But again, we want students to kind of, we really determined with our middle schoolers that this was the step that was going to help take them to the next level. So I want to start bringing it down into elementary. So here's what it might look like for an informative prompt. If you've been doing our lessons, you've been doing this all along. Same idea, except you would organize it by source, because if they're just having to explain how technology has changed over the years, they're just looking for random details about how technology has changed. So they would just record it by source 1, source 2, and then if there is a source 3 and 4, they could just add it at the bottom. So I wanted to show you what it's going to look like for both modes. So here it is completed for this text set. It looks like a lot, but it's really because I have the planet name in front of every detail, because I guess you wouldn't even necessarily need it, or you could abbreviate the planet name, but I was just kind of trying to keep track of which planets I was describing. So this is an example of what a completed chart would look like after reading all 3 of these sources on the inner and the outer planets. What I really like about this is that it helps students see all their evidence in one place, and it keeps them from having to kind of flip back and forth between 3, 4, 5 pages of text and trying to find those little I's or the O's or everything they underlined. This really shows me, okay, this is all the things I have about inner planets. This is all of the things I have about outer planets. Now I want to mention something to you. Currently right now with 3, 4, and 5, we're having students complete this chart after they've read and marked their text. What I want to tell you is that in middle school, we actually encourage them to do this as they're reading their text. Now, I know our kids may not be ready for that quite yet. That's fine, but I just want to let you know where we do end up going in middle school. One of the reasons for that is, our 7th and 8th graders have their FSA on the computer. So they're not allowed to mark their text. There is no way for them to mark their text other than highlighting on the computer, and that doesn't really help them very much. So our students in 7th and 8th grade, this is their only way of marking evidence. So we have them kind of combine the steps together and do it all at once. So I just want to kind of let you know, if you ever think your kids are ready for that, you can build that in. So now what? I have this whole chart. Now I have to start making some decisions. So here's what I need to think about. I could think about which side has more evidence. Now this one happens to be pretty even. So this one's not gonna, like, one side doesn't stand out to me more than the other, but sometimes it will. Which side interests me more? So like, are there elements on one side that I just am more interested in and I think I might be able to elaborate or write more about? What connections or similarities can I find between my sources? So meaning if I go back here on inner planets, do I see connections between the source 1 and the source 2 evidence? And then on outer planets, can I see connections between source 1 and source 3? Because remember, I have to use multiple sources. So really thinking about where I can see those connections. Which pieces, what will my 2 reasons or big ideas be? So really starting to think about which side might be able to come up with 2 reasons. Which pieces of evidence am I able to elaborate on? So that's your insight, your original thought, your personal connection. Obviously the air being poisonous, I don't have a personal connection to that, because if our air was poisonous, I wouldn't be here. So it's really starting to have students think about the evidence and what's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck. And then will I be able to use evidence from multiple sources? So more than one. I can't just use source 1 and write my whole essay. I really need to try to use a second text there. So based on all of those questions, I'm going to show you what I might decide. And this is what you could model for kids. I picked inner planets. So I just felt like I just had a little bit more there. I felt like there was stuff there that was more interesting, and I started to see some connections to my brainstorming thoughts. So I figured maybe my elaboration might be better. So I picked inner planets. I'm going to draw an X through outer planets. I'll tell you right now that when you do that for kids and tell them to draw an X through it, they're going to be like, are you serious? We wrote all that for nothing? Are you serious? Right? So you kind of got to get their buy-in, but they'll eventually get to the point where they realize that they needed to see it all in one place to make the best decision. And then when they get into argumentative writing, they're going to need to mention the counterclaim anyway. So they're going to still use that evidence on the other side. So just one of those kind of funny things about when you're doing this with students. So for inner planets, my next decision is, am I going to use all of these pieces of evidence? No, no, no. We are not writing a book report. We are not writing a research paper. We are not giving a summary of everything that we've read. We have been asked to give our opinion about if we'd rather explore inner planets and why. So now I have to determine 2 really good reasons why I chose inner planets. So I need to start making connections. So as I started to look down the list and see connections, I really started to notice there were lots of things that talked about like weather and temperature. So you'll see there every piece of evidence that had to do with weather or temperature, I just marked it with a W. Then I started to see stuff about kind of like land formations or things on the land, like that it's rocky, that there's water on the surface, that it's dusty, that there's craters, right? So I start marking an L for land. Then I'm seeing some other connections and I'm like, okay, so it's fast, it's slow, it's poisonous, it rotates opposite. I'm like, well, what do all those have in common? Well, they're kind of just unique traits about those particular planets. So I just happen to mark that with a U. If kids can't find a connection between those and they just kind of cross them out, that's fine too, because they have already identified 2 reasons. So based on this, I think that I'm probably going to do a little bit better with the weather and the land because I have a lot to say about temperature and weather, and I have a lot to say about kind of like land formations, especially like water or volcanoes and canyons. And again, the poisonous thing, I don't really have much to say. The rotation, the fast, the slow, you can't feel that anyway, so I'm not sure what I'd say about it. So it's just teaching students kind of that process of critically thinking about the evidence and really taking the time to determine which pieces of evidence they can support the best. So I'm going to stop right here. Excuse me. If you have specific questions or kind of comments about this process or what we've done up to here, I'd love to hear them. So you can either put them in the chat and Mandy can help me monitor, or if you want to unmute and ask a question, we'd be happy to respond. You guys are quiet. I hope you're all there and with me. Maybe you're just really into the science prompt and process and you're enjoying it, and that would be awesome. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'll make sure you guys have some chance to answer questions or ask questions at the end. Let me see what I got. I'm with you. Let's keep going. I love it, you guys. Okay, so here we go. Now we're to the second part of step 4 where we're going to plan. Well, what's really, really cool is that because we did this, we actually have most of our plan already completed, because now we've determined which side we're going to write about. We've determined which 2 reasons we're going to give. And once you do this, you've got to kind of pick your evidence. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here we are. This is just one way to plan. This is the BMME or the IBBC. It's just the 4 quad document that as a 6th grade teacher, most of my kids came to me knowing, which means most elementary schools are still using this and it works well, so why change it? If you got another way, that's great too. So here is our 4-box plan. This is what they would draw on the back of that planning sheet. And here's what it would look like. So in the introduction box, all I have my students do is write their opinion statement or their controlling idea. So they have to kind of reword that prompt. If I could travel to outer space, I would rather explore the inner planets for the weather and land features. So I have to put those 2 reasons in my opinion statement or in my introduction, right? So I've got those there. So then what I do is I label my 2 body paragraph boxes with the 2 reasons so that I can kind of remind myself as I'm writing so I don't lose focus or go off track, that I'm writing about weather in one and land features in the other. So now here's where they've got to pick their evidence. You'll see here I kind of already did that, but what you would do is you would go back to this list and you'd say, okay guys, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different pieces of evidence on weather. Which ones do we think we want to talk about? Which ones do you think you can elaborate on? Which ones aren't going to be exactly the same, right? So you'll see paragraph 6, Venus is the hottest planet, and paragraph 19, Venus is the hottest planet. I would not want to use those 2 in my body paragraph because they're the same exact thing. Now I could use one of them and then talk about a different planet, but these are the types of things we need kids to kind of pay attention to. So then I see that we have dusty cold desert, wild temperatures, lightning, 4 seasons. Ooh, I like 4 seasons. I think I maybe want to write about that, right? So they're kind of determining. So you'll see here that I picked paragraph 14 on wild temperatures and paragraph 24 about 4 seasons, all right? Then for land features, same idea. They have more than 2 available, but they really only need 2 or 3. So it's really determining which 2 pieces of evidence under land you want to write about. So since the Earth has liquid water on the surface, I know that's the ocean. I love the ocean, so I definitely want to talk about that. And then it talks about another planet having canyons and volcanoes, which we have here on Earth. So I really want to talk about that. Now, one thing for students to kind of keep in mind is, again, to try to make sure they're including evidence from more than one source. So you'll see here, I think paragraph 14 starts source 2. So I have 1 piece of evidence, the one from 7 from source 1, and that's okay. So if I have 2 pieces of, or 2 sources, as long as I'm pulling at least 1 piece of evidence from a second source, I'm good to go, okay? And then for the conclusion, I literally just have my kids draw an arrow because I don't want them wasting time saying the same exact thing that they have in their introduction box. So here's what I want to talk about with the plan. You absolutely could ask your kids to put more on their plan if you want, or if that's what they're used to, like a hook, elaboration, things like that. I just really got to the point with my students where I felt like it was wasting more time than it was worth in the end, and that the most important thing was the essay. So once my students kind of got used to this simple plan, which is another thing, if you don't know middle schoolers, they don't really want to do anything that you tell them to do, especially plan their essay. So if you can at least talk them into doing like this, it doesn't take long and they can get on board with you. So you kind of got to bargain with them. So I just have my students do this, and then the hope is that as they're writing, the elaboration kind of comes to them. They know they have to have it, but they don't necessarily have to write it on their plan ahead of time. But if that's what you do and it works, then keep on keeping on. All right, so there's your plan. All right, back to our brainstorming, because we're getting ready to write, right? So we're getting ready to write our essay. We know we're gonna have to elaborate on some of that evidence. So let me go back to my brainstorming and see if there's anything that might relate to what I've chosen to write about. So yes, the fact that some planets are closer to the sun, guess what? Those are the inner planets that I've decided to write about. And the fact that some planets are really hot and some are freezing cold, that directly relates to the piece of evidence I chose about the wild temperatures. So I'm really excited that some of the thoughts I already had about this topic might actually help me out when I'm writing my essay. So that's where step 2 comes back into play. Again, super quick, revisit. Is there anything I might be able to use? Good, yes. If not, that's okay, move on. All right. Step 5. So obviously, since we're not using an Elmo and we don't have a ton of time, we're not going to like write an essay together, but I'm really excited because I have an example essay that I want to show you guys, and I want to discuss and kind of break down and unpack with you guys. So I'm going to put the essay up. It by no means is the best thing you've ever read, but it's definitely not the worst. So take a few minutes, and I want you to read this sample essay on this specific topic, and it's using the exact evidence I showed you on the planning sheet. I'll be quiet for a few minutes for you guys to read. Okay, I'm thinking you probably had a chance to read. I'm going to keep it up, so don't worry, because we're going to really talk about this. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just moved it. We're going to talk about this essay, the good things, the bad things. and maybe what the student did well on and what they could improve on. So let's talk about some possible questions to ask ourselves. So did the response state an opinion? Did the student pick a side and stick to it? Did they give at least 2 reasons to support the opinion? Was the response organized into multiple paragraphs? Did they use transitions, topic sentences? Did the response include cited textual evidence from multiple sources? And did it include elaboration? So I have these same questions with the essay on the next slide, so we'll be able to kind of go through each one. So here's the essay. You'll notice that I've highlighted it a bit. This is like actually a color coding system we use in middle school and high school. But you'll see that the opinion statement or our controlling idea or our claim or whatever it is for what mode we're writing in is going to be green. And then the evidence is all highlighted in yellow. The elaboration is all highlighted in blue. And then you'll see that there's some sentences that I didn't highlight, and I really want to talk about that. So first, let's go through the questions. So did the response state an opinion? Yes, there it is in that first sentence where they chose to explore inner planets and they gave those 2 reasons. You'll see throughout that they only talk about inner planets, so they absolutely stuck to their side. They gave at least 2 reasons, so it was weather and land features. Was it organized into multi-paragraphs? Yes, you can see right there we have 4 paragraphs. Transitions and topic sentences, you'll see that to begin, I would rather explore the inner planets for the weather, and additionally, exploring the inner planets would be better because of the cool land features. Cited textual evidence for this is all direct quoted evidence, which is an option for evidence. You can also do paraphrasing, but either way, you want to encourage them to cite or give reference to the source. So you'll see, for example, source 2 describes, according to paragraph 24, source 1 describes, in source 2 it explains. So I've kept it super simple. And then you'll see there, let's see, I've got source 1, paragraph 24, source 1, source 2. So I do have multiple sources. And then elaboration or original thought, yes, that's what's in the blue. Some of them are personal connections or little examples or experiences from my life. Some of them are just kind of like thoughts about the evidence, but you'll see there that for every piece of evidence, there is elaboration, which is super important that students know there needs to be a balance of that. I want you to pay close attention to kind of that second sentence in the introduction. That's just kind of like an extra sentence that I've put there to kind of give a little bit more information about inner planets. Then you'll see those random sentences in the middle of the body paragraphs. What I want you to notice about those sentences is those are really transitioning kind of from one piece of evidence and elaboration to the next piece of evidence and elaboration. Our striving writers and our younger kids, that's going to be a struggle for them, but it's definitely something you want to start building into their writing so it doesn't seem choppy going from one piece of evidence to the next. And then, of course, you'll see a sentence at the end of every body paragraph. That's our wrap up, our conclusion, kind of reminding the reader what that paragraph was about in general. So this is just an example, but definitely there's things that we could improve upon. So let's talk about some of those things. So did it begin with a hook? No, not really, right? So there's not a hook there. Obviously, some of our really high scoring papers are going to have those really interesting kind of like grab you in hooks. So that's something that you can build to eventually, but just know it's not the most important thing in the essay, that this stuff is the most important stuff. So do this first and then kind of add on when they're ready. Did the response include varied sentence structure? Maybe a beginning of it, you know, but could it be better? Oh, absolutely, right? Is there a variety of elaborative techniques? So in looking at them, you'll see I have some stems in other words. This reminds me of, it would be interesting to see, I can only imagine, right? So we are seeing a little bit of variety there in elaborative techniques, but I'm sure there's lots more I could do. And then are there elements of voice and style? I'm not quite there yet with this essay. I'm starting to see a little bit of stuff like, oh, it was massive, right? That kind of stands out to me and is cute, shows personality. So just knowing that this is kind of like, this is the basics right here. This is just taking your evidence, putting in some elaboration and some transitions, and then you can kind of add on once they're to this point. But if they wrote an essay like this, they would definitely score better than most, right? It's not a 4.42, but you know, it's definitely got pieces of 3s, and it'd be something that, you know, we'd be really happy with a lot of our kids. I know Mandy Leathers has been doing a lot of work at Just Elementary the past few weeks, and she's gotten some of her kids that she's working with to write essays that look exactly like this, and they are, I mean, thrilled with what they have done. And they're so excited that they were able to create essays this long. They're really, really enjoying the process. So something for you to kind of look forward to if you haven't gotten here with your kids yet. All right, I want to stop here. And before we get to step 6 and see if there's any questions or thoughts about what we've done so far. Looking at the chat, yes, I'm recording it. How long will we have access to it? And I think these things take like hours to download onto your computer, and then I have to figure out how to upload it. So I'm gonna work on that probably tomorrow. I'll try to have it done by end of day tomorrow, but if not, I'll definitely have it up by Monday. Okay, any other thoughts, comments? Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to go through, yes, I will include this essay as a document, right, without the highlighting and with the highlighting, so that you can use it as you wish with your students. You guys could edit it, you could add hooks to it, you could even take out some of the stuff and have them put their own elaboration in. That would be really fun. Even if you're not doing this 5th grade, you know, cycle yourself, you could still have some fun with this example. Okay, I'm going to move on, and then when we get to the end, we'll definitely have time to talk again. So now we're to step 6, you guys. This one's, you know, this one does take some teaching and some practice, because students don't necessarily know what it means to revise and edit. And it's something that you kind of have to just work with them on. So all you really want them to know is like, okay, you're going to have 120 minutes to do this. You may not have a ton of time at the end, but if you do, I need you to take time after you're done writing, and I want you to just read through what you've written, because a lot of times your brain is going to work faster than your hands. You may skip words or skip a whole thought, and if you just reread what you've written, you'll find some of those mistakes really easily. So does it make sense? Did I include evidence and elaboration? Did I remember to cite the evidence? Did I capitalize the first word in every sentence and proper nouns? Did I spell words correctly that can be found in the text? You guys, spelling is not a huge deal on this. However, if the word is in the text or the prompt, they're really going to assume that the student's going to spell it correctly in their response, because they can see it right there in the text or the prompt. So just kind of things to remind students of if they've got time at the end. All right, so let's talk about, so we just went through the whole 6-step process. Obviously not every step, you know, the whole length or whatever, but I think I showed you enough of each step for you to kind of get the gist or the idea of how it might look with students. So let's talk about the 10-day cycle in the classroom, the frameworks, how this can look and work with you in the classroom. So here we have a 10-day example. So this is just kind of a basic example of what kind of a majority of the 10-day cycle lessons probably look like, where day 1, they might be talking about a topic or a focus for the week. This might be where you add in a little mini lesson about a specific strategy or skill you want students to practice that week. Then you might unpack the prompt and do the quick brainstorming on the prompt. Then in day 2, you might begin reading source 1 and marking your evidence. Maybe day 3, you're reading source 2, marking your evidence. Maybe you do the first few paragraphs as a class and then they do it on their own or work with a partner. Day 4, so this is just a 2-source text set for an example. Day 4 is when they might move that marked evidence to that T-chart or to organizing their ideas and kind of start making those decisions. Which one do you want to write about? Where are you seeing connections? Day 5 is when they might then move that information to their quick plan. And then the second week of the cycle is really where they're writing their essay. So they may write the introduction on day 6, body paragraph day 7, body paragraph day 8, conclusion day 9, and then day 10 could be for revision and editing or sharing or feedback or whatever, right? But I want you to know that this is all flexible. So for instance, if I'm teaching in a classroom and I do my mini lesson on day 1 and I don't really get to the unpacking and the brainstorming because, oh no, I only have 30 minutes, then that's okay. Then I'll start day 2 by unpacking and brainstorming. Or vice versa. Maybe I don't really have a mini lesson for the week. I just want to dig right in. Then I'm going to unpack the prompt, brainstorm, and start source 1 on day 1. Right? So some of these days and activities within the days are going to bleed into other days. If I'm done with a step or a day's activity and it's only been 20 minutes, I'm not going to be like, okay, writing's done for the day, right? I'm actually just going to go to whatever we were going to do the next day and start going through with the process, or vice versa. If I'm in the middle of source 1 and it's 30 minutes, if I've got some flexibility within my schedule because laughs that day only took 20 minutes, then I might take 40 minutes that day for writing. So I just want you to know that that's where you guys come in. We are writing lessons kind of for the masses, and it has to kind of fit e-learning and brick and mortar. So specifically for e-learning kids, we have to give them like a task a day to do or complete. But if you're in the classroom or you're on Zoom with your kids, it doesn't have to stick to this plan. Like that's why we've given you 10 days. If you want to spend more time on the reading and organizing your ideas, then spend more time on that part and spend less time at the end. Or vice versa. You want to spend more time writing or co-constructing or conferencing or whatever, then make sure you've got more time for that the second week. So just want you to know that there's flexibilities within the days. You should adjust the pace to meet the needs of your students and to scaffold or extend as needed. As long as you're going through the 6 steps, the days can look different. So daily options, doing that gradual release, I do, we do, you do, doing co-construction and think alouds. You could have students be doing independent practice while you're conferencing, or even pulling a small group for extra support. Lots of options within this 30-minute time frame, you guys. All right. For you 4th and 5th grade teachers and 3rd grade teachers, if you really wanted to do it, you could too. But for 4th and 5th, especially for our FSA purposes, here's what is going to be an option for you. Kind of starting probably February, March-ish. All right, so we're still going to be rolling out 10-day cycles with a text set and a prompt that you could do over 10 days, especially for our e-learning students, right? However, in addition to that, we're also going to push out some extra prompts and text sets that you could decide to do instead. So let's say laughs lesson 16 and 17 is about animals helping people. I'm not going to do that 10-day cycle. Instead, I'm going to do 2 5-day cycles with 2 different text sets and prompts. Or maybe you could use the animal one and just do 5 days. But we wanted to give you the option to kind of give your kids a little bit more of that real-time FSA time practice. So if you look at our framework, we have 30 minutes for writing. So day 1, you would provide the packet to students. Students would complete step 1, unpack the prompt, step 2, brainstorm, and they would begin reading and marking their evidence. That's 30 minutes. Then day 2, they would finish step 3. So all the sources they need to get finished. That's why they're starting on day 1. So by now, at the end of day 2, that's 60 minutes of time. So they should not only have read through all the sources, but even start recording them on their T-chart or on the back of their planning page. Then by day 3, they should definitely be finishing that organization. They should get their plan done, and they should even begin writing, possibly get their introduction done. And then day 4 is really writing the rest of their essay and reading over it. So 4 days of 30 minutes is 120 minutes. So that's kind of to give them an idea. I know it's still broken up over days, so it's not perfect, but it's better than having them spend 2 weeks doing something that they're really only going to have 120 minutes to do. So when you think your kids are ready for this, hopefully in February or March, this is where you're going to have this option to do with students. And then day 5, you guys can, choose what you're going to do with that day, share with each other, give feedback, do a mini lesson, whatever it is that you think. Again, this is going to be super flexible. This is just going to be an option for you guys instead of that 10-day cycle. All right, let's talk about conferencing a little bit. I know a lot of you conference, so really, you know the benefits of conferencing one-on-one with students while they write. That's where you're monitoring their progress. You're kind of catching mistakes as they're making them and assisting those struggling students that may not be ready to write on their own. So one of the resources that we have provided to you in some of the lessons, you may not have gotten to that lesson yet, but this resource is linked, and I'll link it to our coach meeting resource icon too. But this is an opinion writing checklist. This is a tool that Mandy and I have used with our students for years. And basically it just kind of guides students through writing their essay. Because if you're back at a conferencing table and you're meeting with a few kids, the rest of the kids are at their desks writing, right? And they may be like, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do for body paragraph 1. So instead of coming back to ask you that, they have this kind of checklist, which you could edit to meet the needs of your expectations. But they have this checklist to kind of go for, like, okay, I got to start with a transition, then I got to put a reason, and then a piece of evidence. And then once they get to that stop sign, they know that they can't go further until they go back and check with you. So that way, if they've done something really wrong in paragraph 1, you're going to fix the mistake before they write paragraph 2. This is one of my favorite things to do with kids, is this conferencing, because you're able to see each student a minimum of 4 times while they write an essay. And I guarantee the essay they end up with is going to be 100 times better than the essay that they would have had if you weren't guiding them along the way. Obviously you can't do this during FSA, so it has to be something that you work with them on from now until then, so that they really are fixing those mistakes and learning from the opportunity and from the conferencing. Okay, so the really good news is that we're about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. So we're basically to the end of everything I had to share with you guys. So I want to do a reflection. I want to hear from you. And then, I can answer questions or anything else. And then you're probably going to have a little bit of free time before your, oh, actually you guys have a lunch from 11 to 2. So or I'm sorry, 11 to 12. So actually you'll be done until 12. So that's really awesome. So think about this. What is your biggest takeaway from this session? I know it was a lot. And what is something you will continue to do? Something you saw and you're like, oh, good, I'm going to keep doing that. That's good. Or maybe something new that you'd like to try that you saw or heard about in this session. So you have the choice, you guys. There's 44 of us. You can chat. You can unmute your mic. I'd love to hear from you. I really want to hear, I know you guys have been dying for some writing PD, and I'm hoping that this maybe hit the mark for a few of the things you were looking for. So I'm really dying to hear your feedback.
Sharon, I'm glad to see you walk us through that brainstorming and that thinking process, and helping us make better use of the packets. And you're right, the children, many times I'm not sure what to do with it.
Yeah.
I can see ways of even using this in the primary grades, but that slowing down to speed them up makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Thank you.
My teachers are really enjoying the structure of what we're doing. So like it's super spelled out for children. And then I think like you showed that essay, and then I think once we get them there, then I think adding those kids will naturally have some of that. But we're not even they weren't sometimes even getting the elaboration in. So I just think the structure and knowing this is where our kids are going in middle school,
right?
So they will be super prepared and ready to add all those extra things in, and starting that in 2nd to 3rd. And then also thank you so much for moving the writing mid-year assessment. Like my teachers,
yes, I'm excited.
We're freaking out, and now they will be much
Yes.
Will be much better, and they'll be much more receptive